Yep. Good morning. Welcome to the Stockbridge Bowl Stewardship Commission meeting on February 18th, 2022. I'd like to open the meeting. Welcome, everyone. Good to see everyone. I'd like to approve, and I think I sent you the December 3rd, 2021 meeting minutes.
Yep.
Can we approve those? Is there any corrections?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you, Gary. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And November 11th, we had some, from the December meeting, some corrections, but Roxanne and we're not sure if they've been corrected or not. I have to figure that out with Tammy. So if it would be okay with everyone, we will approve those at the March 4th meeting. Would that be okay?
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you. So to get started, because do we have any sewer and water updates from meetings or?
I don't have any updates. I wasn't present at the last meeting. I did read the minutes, and I really don't have anything.
That's okay. Oh, and thank you, John. Would anyone be willing to take minutes today with Tammy's absence? I wrote that.
On me.
If not, I can just watch the recording and do it.
Better.
Okay, thanks.
Let me ask, is Tammy's just a temporary?
I don't know, so I'll get back to you, I promise.
Yeah.
I know more. So, Michael Nathan, with any information about dredging, any meetings you might have had, or any?
I've had since we went to the GZA and NHASP meeting, there's been nothing really
Okay.
new. We're waiting sort of to have a meeting with the SBA, has to also make a decision on which way they're going to go, because we're trying to do a lake management plan where everybody's on board to present it to NHESP, because they really want to see a unified town. They prefer a unified town decision in which way we want to go.
Okay.
Only way to.
And also that they had said, I might be repeating, that they really were not in favor of doing two projects at the same time.
Sounds
So,
reasonable.
Roxanne was there with me, if there's anything
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
you'd like to add.
But that sounds reasonable. It would be
Yeah.
too difficult.
Question, would it be worth pursuing doing a small dredging or drawdown each year in that?
Well, one of the things that I think NHESP really appreciated was the less drawdown, the better.
The 2 foot?
Well, they allowed us 2.9 feet. So that's really up to the powers to be.
Could we put it in there as a, if okay with you type thing?
Wait, I have nothing.
Yeah, it's Conservation Commission.
That would be
Yes, conservation.
conservation.
You have to talk to conservation.
I'll talk to,
Yeah.
okay, I'll
Yeah,
talk to your boss.
I'm a layman here.
I think the other thing that we have to remember is because we're monitoring, we're collecting all this data now, we want to always take our lead probably from like Cortman and GZA, like managers,
To them?
in terms of get their feelings on that
Okay.
as part of the whole picture. Because it may be in some years, that's a good idea, and it may be in some years, it's not such a good idea. But I would want to rely on their judgment to some extent.
I agree with Roxanne. Yeah.
I think that's a good idea too. Michael, can I ask you a question about that 2.9 feet? How did they, do you know how they determine that? Is that a Stockbridge Bowl specific, time specific idea, or is it just a general idea?
It's the height of the caisson that the gas pipeline goes through.
I'm sorry?
It's the depth of the gas pipeline, 2.9 feet.
I see. Okay, so it's Stockbridge Bowl specific and it doesn't have anything to do with time ever, I guess. Right.
Michael, do you have anything else you'd like?
No, I think Gary is right. I couldn't answer, Gary answered that much better than I could have, because I forgot about they did not want us to go below a certain point And if it went below some point, maybe the diversion pipe might allow it to go further, and they don't want us to use the diversion pipe to lower the lake any more than 2.9.
The pipe is
feet.
closed, so it can.
Yeah, but I think it's specific. It's Stockbridge Bowl specific.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see, what else did we have? Do we have any updates about the town beach and the fixing the driveway? And I know at Conservation, they had talked about removing the invasive plants around the town beach area. So does anyone have any information?
Yeah,
Thank you.
for Parks and Rec, the selectmen and myself and Mike Canales helped out in terms of putting together a couple of CPC requests. And one of the CPC requests that I got an estimate on was the removal of the invasives down in that area of the beach where they want to launch kayak and take from the river and put that dock out there and do a pathway. So anyway, I put together some kind of an estimate. We came up with a number to ask for. So there is a CPC request out there for Parks and Rec to do that work.
Okay.
And
Dock exists, by the way. It's in the shed at the town beach.
pardon
We
me?
have 16 feet of dock down on the, in the basement of
Right.
the building, town beach.
Another 16 feet?
We have, it's
Addition?
dock. I built it a few years back for
Okay.
something, but that would be perfect for kayak launching and.
Well,
It would be.
This is Parks and Rec, so like basically they have the one that they were using down here at the park on the river.
Oh, that one. Oh, that's.
And that kept getting, it's like inappropriate for that location. It got washed away, it got damaged, we've repaired it.
Yep.
So they also have a plan, which we put together another CPC request for, to rather than have a dock there, they would do stone, they would do rocks.
Either way,
So that there is a different kind of access now, and then they would just redeploy the dock they were using.
better because we wouldn't have to take it in and out each year.
Pardon me?
Stone would. be
Over here, yeah.
Much better.
Yeah, and it was like, when we were, especially now that we're getting these heavier rains, yeah, it became more and more problematic to have something like that there. So anyway, so that's where that stands.
Thank you. Okay, anything else with the, I think that covers Town Beach. So boat ramp, Gary Kleinerman, anything new with the boat ramp?
Nothing new. We haven't really started up this year yet.
And-
Another month, we're gonna start polling people and
Okay,
getting things organized.
all right. I didn't
But
think you
it
did.
should be the same as last year.
Can I ask?
Go ahead,
Financially, are you okay?
We're all set.
Okay.
great. Thank you. Any
Yeah.
questions?
Well, and in terms of the boat ramp project with
It's on
DCR,
part of the warrant.
Mike has been in contact with them, but
Mike
again.
Canales?
Mike Canales.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of in limbo. They have like a list of 500
Okay.
different
I
projects.
thought so.
And they're,
I thought they were back.
Yeah, they've had a change of staff. They had someone retire, et cetera, et cetera. So
Just, we didn't need
they're
it.
way behind.
All right, Charlie, do you have anything you'd like to share? Or to help along?
Well, if people wouldn't mind, I'd like to say something that's not specifically related to the commission, but it's related to the Board of Health and the DPH recent changes in the masking, which I think probably everybody should know about. And I'd like to clarify it just from the Board of Health point of view. Is that okay with everybody if I just talk about that for a moment? The DPH has recently recommended a change in the masking guidelines for vaccinated people only. This does not affect unvaccinated people. As far as unvaccinated people are concerned, no changes occurred, none whatsoever. It's exactly the same. Now, as far as the DPH is concerned, the masking indoors is only going to be recommended for people that have specific immune deficiencies or specific other kinds of restrictions. Excuse me, I gotta get my phone up there. Risks that are related to this, so that you would really ask your own doctor about this to determine if you should wear a mask or not when you're indoors. Same thing when you're at home. You ask your doctor if you think there's somebody at home that needs to be protected. But as far as the Board of Health is concerned, at the present time, we still have are recommendations for masking indoors in place and for social, unless you can socially isolate like you guys are doing with your, with your frames and your distancing. The idea here is that the DPH recommendations come from a statewide abatement of the incidence of the disease and the fact that the Omicron has very rapidly subsided, except in Berkshire County. Berkshire County is still, using the CDC's guidelines, a high transmission, very high transmission rate zone. So that we're, for the CDC's purposes, this is the National Center for Disease Control, we should still wear masks just the way the Board of Health directive, the Tri-Town directive is in place saying to do. And this is contrary to the DPH general statewide recommendations. But the last bit of information everybody should know is Berkshire County leads the state in the incidence of disease. If the entire state had the incidence of disease, the transmission rate of disease that we have in Berkshire County, the DPH would not have changed its recommendations. It wouldn't have changed them. It's only changed them because the rest of the state has changed. So we have a Board of Health meeting on March the 9th, and we're going to be looking at this, and I'll stop. That will basically discuss this, and I hope that we can go forward from that. And in addition to that, the Board of Health is exploring ways to help people who have suffered post-traumatic stress, the different groups, the seniors, the businesses, everybody, so that we can handle the mental health side of this once the physical side is gone. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Charlie. Any questions for Charlie? Okay. So on to, we had at our last meeting, we had talked about our memorandum, our Stockbridge Watershed Management Memorandum. Remember, we all had a handout, and we had sort of talked about making a priority list, and Roxanne had thought about making a matrix. So maybe today we could talk a little bit about some of the items that we thought were important, and maybe start to get a list together. So then our next meeting in March 4th, we would have it more solid. We could solidify it. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, great. Who wants to start? Anyone? Does anyone, do we need to sort of refresh? Do we need to?
Well, I'm wondering how we should organize this. So I think we have a couple of different categories, and one is specifically actions that we would take, but I think, what those actions are intended to address. Remediated type of actions in the future might be another category in terms of the sewer extensions, for example, using less salt on the roads in certain areas around the lake. And then I don't know how we would categorize this, because I think a big piece of this has to be education of the public in terms of getting them to use, less chemicals on their lawn, on their property around the lake, for instance. So I don't know. Charlie, do you have any great ideas about how to organize this information?
Well, to tell you the truth, I think that if we follow the organizational framework that Courtman suggested, that's probably a good way to go. I would actually, I think that we need to work closely with him and with the GZA, and so that I'd like to see us actually have a format that he recommends to us that we can follow, so that it works easily with what they want to do, because they're going to be managing our lake and they're going to be telling us what to do. So right. I just want to make sure that what we do is not, first of all, reinventing the wheel.
Well, I just want to clarify. I'm talking about organizing this just so we can give GZA our thoughts on this. And their biggest criteria is that they need things to be prioritized by us. They
I'm
need
sorry,
to
I
know
misunderstood.
what we
I
want.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
I misunderstood.
And so it won't go in any kind of format that we put together. This format would just be so that they can understand what we're talking about. Here are the high points. Here are all the actions we would like to be able to take and have it addressed in the lake management plan. And how do we prioritize those? How do we address them? Charlie, in the last meeting, you talked about having an action plan for incidents, as some kind of policy or procedures that we would be following if we had certain types of incidents, like a cyanobacterial bloom. How would that play out? But I think.
Now I know what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you were talking
Yeah,
about.
I think the main thing is that we prioritize and try to identify everything that we want to have included in this lake management plan. And if we can get through that, then maybe by the next meeting, we can make a little more sense out of it.
Right.
Well, I think we were trying to get this organized the last time, and we put dredging forward as one of the focal points that we wanted to do. And I think that part of the idea was that we were looking at specific time, crucial ideas to start with. And then we were looking, which we would first put forward. And I think dredging is one of those things that we would want to get forward. The harvesting, the harvesting of the weeds and stuff like that is another time crucial thing. We'd like to have that in place. And then there would be second kinds of ideas that would be the ongoing ideas that we think ought to be managed and dealt with, including the lake monitoring program that we have, things that would go on a regular basis that would be ongoing, right? And I'm not saying that dredging wouldn't be ongoing, but I'm not sure that we would have to dredge that frequently or anything like that. Right. We would probably want to harvest on an ongoing basis. And then lastly, we'd have these last things, which would be the incident response ideas, where we have ideas that are, that come up, like cyanobacterial blooms that we didn't want, not that we didn't anticipate them at all, but that we, we have to react to, and because they maybe a very bad summer of rain, that causes something, or a drought, we have to react to various kinds of things. So we would want to have also an incident reaction plan. So those would be the three categories that I would order and organize it by, time crucial ideas, ongoing maintenance ideas, and reactionary ideas to anticipating various kinds of things we'd have to react.
Okay.
And I do remember us talking about that a little bit, sort of loosely.
Well, we talked about like 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and then past
Big
5
projects,
years, long term. Yeah, good point. I think, monitoring. And the other thing that was mentioned in the last meeting was Mike Buffoni talked about possibly doing thermal imaging. That might give us some important information to, specifically where we have a lot of runoff coming into the lake, and what's the impact in terms of the temperature of that water.
Yeah, it wasn't just even runoff, because Mike and I were concerned that the lake is a hard water lake. It has a lot of calcium, and this isn't, as far as I can tell from looking at the runoff, although I haven't analyzed it, we don't have a scientific analysis in this regard. I don't believe that the calcium is coming from the surface runoff that we can identify. I don't think it's coming from the surface streams. It's a sign that there's an underwater source in the lake. Now, Mike's point about thermal imaging is that this kind of underwater source might be located by looking at thermal imaging, because you might expect it to be colder. That's what I believe his point was at that point. And if we do have a big underwater source, we have to see where is it coming from.
Right.
Calcium's coming from everywhere. We're a limestone-based area up here, and limestone is calcium, basically.
Right. And that might be, is that what Denny was talking about, Denny Alsop, about like some kind of, I don't know how he describes it. Yeah.
They describe them as underwater springs.
Yeah.
Well, if you take a look at, let's look at the full idea, calcareous fen, okay? We have a calcareous fen here in town, and a calcareous fen, as I understand it, has as its major water source the underground stream, let's say, whatever you want to call it, that passes through the limestone that is all around the Stockbridge, Lee, Lenox area, West Stockbridge, and it is why they have quarries. But that water comes into a calcareous fen, and it makes the calcareous fen have that particularly hard quality to it because it doesn't really have much superficial source. There's not much runoff from the rain just flowing on the surface and going in. Instead, this water comes from underneath. Now, it may very well have been the case before the Stockbridge Bowl was dammed by the beavers and the Indians a long time ago, that it was a calcareous fen, and that this was the beginning of it. And then it was, of course, enlarged and expanded and dammed. And so we see the superficial runoff. But if, let's say, there's a calcareous fen from the farm, let's say from a nearby farm, and they have a lot of manure or they change their habits on the farm, we may have a vulnerability there to nutrients going into the lake from an underwater pathway that we don't recognize. So this is the importance of that. That's what Denny's point was.
Okay, thank you. So,
Okay, and in terms of other actions that we want to include in here, we've got dredging and harvesting. Then obviously we've got the SBA herbicide project. Optionally, do we want to also include the possible optional use of benthic mats and hydro raking and other forms of actions that could be taken in the future if it was deemed necessary? So, and drawdown might be another one.
yeah, because Gary brought that up.
And also you may want to, I don't know if we want to include here, but the invasive species monitoring. That might be, that's an ongoing.
That would be ongoing, right?
Gary, can I ask you a question? Where are we with, let's say, a current taxonomic classification of the species that exist in the bowl that are natural and unnatural, and invasive? Do we have it clearly identified?
Charlie, I don't have that information per se, but we rely on DCR. Comes in September, and they go through the lake with very fine strainers and take what's the residue in the strainer to a lab where they're looked at and they're DNA tested. So because there's a good and a bad snail or a zebra mussel.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that we don't have any of the bad ones, but there are a few others also. But we depend on DCR for that information.
How about plants? And when we're talking about invasive plants versus the indigenous plants, do we have a similar kind of a let's say a guideline or a framework so that we can be sure that we don't adversely affect the balance between anything as we go along with some of the projects we're interested in?
I'll contact my contact, Tom Flannery at the DCR, and I'll have him get me a list of all the potential invasive species that we have in the Northeast that we should be watching out for.
Well, actually, what I'm looking at here is when we do the lake monitoring program, we're looking at the normal state of the lake in terms of chemistry, in terms of the micro fauna and flora that are in there, at the plankton, all these things, so that we can eventually get a profile for the lake's water and what's going on in that regard, and predict changes that might lead to something like a cyanobacteria bloom, so that we can anticipate a reaction to that, or judge some of our interventions. Now, with respect to plants, the NHESP is always talking to us about various kinds of species and things like that. It might be worthwhile for us to have a similar kind of if we don't have this in place already, a similar kind of a thorough identification program, so that we can look at what the species are in the lake now and make sure that we're not adversely affecting them. This might be something that would give us more credibility with NHESP to go forward with some of our ideas that would show them that we're actually trying to be proactive in terms of not changing the balance of things.
I think we would have to have GCA do that, because I think that's above our pay grade as far as.
I don't think I would ask you to do that, or I wouldn't either, but.
I have to have some professional who recognize.
You're talking about right now, you're just talking about flora, Charlie?
Well, I don't want to limit it to flora. I
think it should be flora and fauna. So basically,
ecological characterization of the lake.
Ecological inventory.
Yes.
And some of this,
exactly.
in terms
the
of
word.
fish species we can get, we get that information every year. Other things are going to be a lot more difficult.
It's like doing an environmental impact study. That's a lot.
I know, but that doesn't mean we can't find people to address
In that direction, I think it would be good to include and let them know where this is on our mind. Whether we can actually implement it 100% would be.
Well, I think
Right.
it'll take time. But once you accumulate this data over time, then we can be in the business of trying to monitor, are we losing any species?
Yeah.
Are we gaining more invasives of anything, whether it's flora or fauna?
We talked to DCR on that because they deal with a lot of lakes and someone else is probably doing this too.
And maybe you could bring that information back at our next meeting. Thank you, Gary. Any other questions, Charlie, about
No.
that?
No, but that's a suggestion for an item to be put on our list of, recommendations to be considered for the lake management plan.
And is the zebra mussel yearly? Is that the testing done yearly by the,
Yes.
okay.
It's done by DCR in September.
And they give you the report?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right. Do you know the format that GZA wants our recommendations, or do they just want a list?
It
Or
doesn't have to be in a specific format. It
Okay.
just has to be understandable so that they understand, number one, what our bullet points are, and number two, what our priorities are.
Okay. In harvesting, it's my understanding we already have, for 3 years, we already have the work order. Is that correct?
Right, but as Michael said, NHESP has strongly made their position very clear that they don't want to have two different projects necessarily ongoing at the same time. Now,
But we
that
have to
might be,
decide on
that
our,
might be negotiable in terms of if we were doing, say, dredging, could we do in some certain areas? Obviously, we're avoiding the areas that are being dredged. It's not even necessary if it's being dredged. Or if it was an herbicide project, there's already an order of conditions that says we have to avoid those areas. So I think that's
I
covered.
think, can I just? Yeah, I think the question to Jamie, and I don't want to put words, is,
Go ahead.
is the order of condition for the harvester still good for the next 2 years?
right.
In other words, because we're not going to dredge in the next year or two, probably, or hopefully in 2 years we might, but definitely not next summer. This summer nor,
Right.
yeah. So is that order of conditions still good? I was a little confused by NHESP's
I know
thing
it's
on that,
1 year.
whether it was 1 year or whether, and we should really find out.
Oh, yeah, but it also is going to depend whether we can harvest or not in terms of if we ultimately, and I think Pat Kennelly is here somewhere. But I think we're still waiting for a date to have a meeting.
I thought that was in April.
No, this is a different meeting.
Oh, sorry.
This is the SBA, the town, and DEP. So I think,
Roxanne?
yeah, Pat?
Yeah, in fact, we just heard from Brian Harrington, who is Mass DEP, who was confirming the people that he needed to address for the meeting. So the Stockbridge Select Board, as well as Mike Canales, is on his list. And what he's going to do is send out potential dates for us all to say whether we can meet or not. So that is ongoing now.
Right,
Thank you.
yeah, so we're still kind of in limbo until we get that date.
Do we have an update, and you and I spoke about it, from the mechanical point of view, if they're working on it? What's going on with, do they plan on having the harvester that went upside down
Oh,
to
is
be
it
fixed,
repaired?
to be repaired?
We don't have an update on, but you have to remember, we have another harvester.
Can we use
Well-
the other one okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that doesn't really answer my question.
No, it doesn't.
You know, I mean, I know we have another one. I've driven both of them, but the small one is really more ideal for certain areas of the lake. It's just faster, it's easier to maneuver. So I was just curious if maybe Michael Canales could just give them a call and find out what the status is.
Right, well, I can find out from Hugh. Hugh will know.
Want to get a new harvester.
Well, of course.
So wait, we've lost the thread a little. So it's back to the harvesting. It was my understanding it was a 3-year. We used it last year and this would be our next year, so year 2. And I don't think dredging will start. And so I guess we have to wait to see about herbicides, but we can't do herbicides and dredging is my understanding. Not that.
They prefer us not to do that. They haven't been totally, you're not going to do 2. But if you ask me, and I think Roxanne got the same thing, it's probably going to be a difficult sell to do both. And not only that,
Yeah, they won't.
that it's a better sell that we're all united.
Right.
The whole town is united in what we want to see done for the lake. What's the priority?
Right, in the order in which.
For the associations,
actions
for the
be taken.
town, everybody to be on the same page. GZA said that to us and NHESP basically said that.
Well, and it's also cost. They're both expensive and.
Right, well, that's, right.
They're long projects.
Right.
We need to remember that.
What's our
And
one?
Dredging.
dredging.
I mean, I feel.
I feel dredging.
Yeah, the town feels dredging. Now we have to go to the SBA.
The only one everyone's going to agree on too.
But, just the noise of it. And so we have to make sure people are educated and know the why to do it. The benefit, yes.
Well, and that, yeah, falls under that heading of education. It's going to be
Yeah,
really
that-
important to communicate things to the public and make sure people understand what's happening, when it's happening, what the impacts may be, and what the benefits are.
All right. So any other ideas for our matrix or our priorities?
Well, can we agree on basically the actions? Do we want to include possible optional use of benthic mats, hydro raking, drawdowns? I mean, do we want to put everything in the list and then say, here are the actions we feel this is our priority list for what we would like to be doing first in the 1 to 3 year period?
Call it a bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's always good to add more because you can always take away,
Right.
And
You can't
I would
add.
like to do the following pending approval.
Yes.
Like that.
right.
All right, so I'd like to clarify or add something onto that, the thermal imaging idea is that if the thermal imaging shows a potentially significant underwater source, that we do a hydrogeological study of the watershed.
Right, but that would be under the category of like an ongoing maintenance along with the lake monitoring that we're
Asking.
doing. Something we would be continuously doing.
Yeah.
Well, no, the hydrogeological study would be a basis study. It's an initial foundation study.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay,
So that would be an early on, it would be like the beginning lake monitoring. It wouldn't be an ongoing study. It would just be an initial thing. Once you find out where the water's coming from, then you know what you have to, then you can monitor it, but you don't have to keep doing the study again, where it's coming from. The hydrogeological study would only be triggered if the thermal imaging shows a significant underground water source. If we find a significant underground water source, then we do a hydrogeological study to determine where that water is coming from. And then we can monitor that area and we can determine whether or not the source area, let's say it's the High Lawn Farm. I'm not saying that they have a thing. I'm just saying, for example, then if we find that we're getting a lot of nutrients coming in the water for some reason, phosphate or nitrogen or E. coli or whatever, we can be monitoring that area and look up above where the change might be occurring that we want to do something about.
okay, so that would be secondary to the thermal imaging. If the thermal,
Yeah, if the thermal
if
imaging
there's
shows no
underground-
source, then
Yeah.
forget it. We don't have to do that.
okay,
okay, thanks.
hydrogeological study in there based on findings of thermal imaging.
Yes. I'm
Right.
assuming the thermal imaging is a good way to exclude that source. And I'll double check that for the next meeting. I'll make sure that I have that in place, but I think it is.
Thank you, Charlie. We'll check. Okay. Anything, any other ideas? No?
Can we run down the list just so we can refresh our memories there, please, Jamie?
Sure. What I have, and Roxanne's been taking notes also, is we need to prioritize dredging, harvesting, and then the ongoing water testing. See if we can do an invasive plants and fauna study, thermal imaging, and then we have long-term would be dredging, incidentals like blooms. So I have it in 3 columns. I think Roxanne did it by years.
Well, no, I mean, in terms of actions, I've got dredging, harvesting, herbicide project, then also benthic mats, hydro raking, and drawdowns as basic actions that could be taken, that we could then prioritize those. The monitoring, the thermal imaging, those are an ongoing, at least for some period of time for thermal imaging. But monitoring is an ongoing maintenance activity.
Right.
That is, you know, from year 1 to wherever, forever.
The thermal imaging would just be a one-time deal, I think.
Right.
Either it's there or it isn't.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. But how long will that take? It may take more than 1 year to do, you know, enough thermal imaging.
I don't know. I think it would be, we have to get some sort of advice about that, but I think that it should be in there as Jamie was saying, as a thing to possibly take off if it doesn't seem to hold water.
Exactly. It seems like it would be like a test, like when you go to the doctor, you get a medical test. Like it wouldn't be a long-term thing, but I'm not sure. Again.
And then under like long-term, you know, we're probably talking, you know, over 5 years out, would be the possibility of sewer extensions. That's something that's going to be out there. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight.
We need them.
And then kind of in a closer range, maybe 3 to 5 years, is actually accurately monitoring the salt application on the roads around certain areas of the lake. Because in our select board meeting, Hugh yesterday talked about updating our application equipment for salting and sanding the roads so that we have better calibration and we actually can capture the data of what we're applying. And then we have the history of what we're applying. Then we can actually, if we wanted to, we could cut back on salt and see how far can we cut back on some of these chemicals we're using on the roads, but still have safe roads. Right now, we don't have a lot of accuracy because a lot of they're older systems. So we're looking at probably upgrading those systems so that they are better, you know, we're calibrating it and we're capturing the information. So that might be in a 3 to 5 year range where we would really accurately be able to cut back in certain areas on the salt usage. Or maybe less, maybe, you know, we could accomplish it in 1 to 3 years.
You know, that leads into something that I think is another ongoing thing, which would be an educational program. I know the SBA has already taken the lead on that. They have a very good, they put forward a lot of good information for people who live around the bowl. I'm wondering if the commission ought to also look at this, you know, so that we can have a general educational program for people who live in the watershed of the bowl. Is this something that we might want to put forward to you know, I know the SBA's already, as I said, has already taken advantage, you know, taken a real good step with this. Do you think it's necessary for us to take a hand in, including, let's say, the use of salt, you know, and other things, you know, that people might be using or not using, but not being aware of the negative effects?
The SBA program deals mostly with phosphates, you know, and fertilizers, soaps, and things like that.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's a great public relations idea. In other words, I think Charlie's onto something. The SBA, it's already done.
Okay.
And pick it up from the SBA if the SBA would allow us. I mean, I'm sure they will. But I think that's a great public relations for NHESP and also I don't know if we included the beach area in this lake management plan? Is the beach something that we should be putting in recreational for the town? I mean, things, how we want to use the lake recreationally for the town as a plan? You know, things that are on our mind. I mean, you know, agendas for further down, because it's such an important recreational area for the town. We can't.
I mean, I don't know how that applies though to the lake management plan, quite frankly. I don't know what the connection would be, and it's under the purview of like Parks and Rec, in terms of, you know,
Unless
their
Michael,
actions at the beach. Now, we can make recommendations,
Right,
obviously.
yeah.
or were you, Michael, were you trying to just say education, like the educational piece?
No, well, those are two different things. What
Okay.
Charlie was saying was the educational thing of how to maintain the lake from a people's point of view, I believe, you know, like fertilizers, all the different things that should be on there, of how we should encourage and mandate that none of these things be used around the lake.
Maybe, Michael, we could combine the ideas. Let's say, I mean, it would certainly be a reasonable thing for this commission to send out something to the different, like Parks and Rec, that if Parks and Rec is contemplating some kind of an idea of change around the beach or some sort of this or that or the other thing, that they would run it by us, you know, and that we'd be very happy to look at that and see how that fits into the whole picture. In other words, that we would, you know, I'm sure this is probably obvious to everybody, but make it clear that we'd be willing to look at these things to see how they do affect the lake, and that's one of the reasons we're here.
Well, yeah, I was talking about the lake management plan, but that, what you're saying is an agenda, I think, rather than
Right.
on the plan.
Right.
You know, yeah. All right.
It's Pat. Can I make a couple of comments, if that's okay, about what we're talking about?
Yes, Pat.
First of all, the SBA would be more than happy to partner with the commission or with anybody in terms of education. And Gary and Mike are right. And thank you, Charlie, for the shout out for the education thing. Been looking primarily at things like phosphates and whatever. So if we need to add salt and other things to that effort, more than happy to partner and get that out into the public arena. Also, Roxanne, when you were saying earlier about dredging and education, you and I have talked about that we need to partner with the town and really make people understand how important the dredging project is. Mike, when you talked about the beach a little bit, and I go back, Roxanne, when you say what you want to put in as potential, benthic mats would be something that would be of a great benefit to any beach area. And so you might want to have that as part of the plan. And whether it's the top priority or whether you do it, at least put it in there. And then I had two other points. When we were talking about a plant study, just know that, and I forwarded this to a number of people on the commission, that the SBA did do a submersed aquatic vegetative study in 2018 and 2019, where we really did survey the whole lake and can give you an inventory of the plants we found. Obviously, that changes over time. And just so you put it in your chip, if you will, those studies cost about $15,000 a year. So we may want to think those studies are important, but how often do we want to do them? And then the other thing that just occurred to me, again, putting things like hydro raking as a potential, because there are certain parts of the lake where that's appropriate, particularly when we're talking about water lilies. But my gut is saying, let the dredging happen first and see what that does. And then later on, hydro raking might be an important thing. Those are all the notes I was scribbling down as everybody was covering things. So I'll be quiet now.
Thank you, Pat, for your input. Any other questions, comments, suggestions?
I have one more suggestion. Do we
Hi,
want
Charlie.
to look at the zoning in the watershed area or overlay ideas and communicate with the planning board about that, looking forward for the lake in the future? I mean, is that something that the commission is interested in potentially getting involved in?
I don't know if I understand.
Well, in
Conservation.
other words, if we have a water, we have, for example, right now, we have some very large homes that have recently been built around the lake. And big trees have been cut down and various kinds of things have happened, rocks put in the water, all various, and the Conservation Commission obviously has a certain interest in this, and that's one idea. But the commission actually has a very specific mandate that even is more specific than the Concom in a lot of ways, because we're specifically looking at the lake's future. And we want to make sure that what we're doing, that we're monitoring things. We don't want to just monitor what is happening that gets bad and bad and bad and bad and bad. We want to be proactive and look at what might happen and how can we change that from happening. So that for me looks at the whole idea, and Portman mentioned this in some of his talks, that there are, lake management plans can include zoning change recommendations. And this is something to look at, I think.
Now I understand. Thank you. I think that's a good point, because there is, that is a concern, all the trees coming down and bigger houses want.
Yeah, on the other hand,
Conservation, that's the overlay district. isn't
By
it?
the LOPD.
right.
Just adopt that as part of our plan.
Well, I mean,
That overlay, Gary, can I ask you how far, I don't think that overlay district goes back very far from the shore. Whereas I think that I'm talking
It's
about the
100.
watershed. I'm talking about the whole watershed, where we know the stuff comes in from.
And the overlay goes 150, I think.
Yeah.
yeah. And the thing is, that we
Except-
have to remember is that the authority actually lies with the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board.
Yeah.
Certainly, we can make recommendations, and there's obviously concern about this already on both of those groups, so.
And we are starting new performance standards on the Conservation Commission to include some of these things.
So you'll keep us posted on any of that then.
Anything else, Charlie?
Oh, but I just want to make sure that, I think that interacting with those two boards or commissions is a very important aspect of the future lake management plan. That's what I think.
I agree. I think we all do. Okay, so when we meet next week, how can we be the most efficient and effective with getting our priorities? Do we want to each make our own list and then sort of put it together democratically, or?
Can I suggest that you make just an outline
Sure.
of the most important thing we're here discussing is the lake management plan.
Right, of course.
What goes in it. I suggest that you make just an outline of what we discuss, not specifics, just like.
A matrix or a chart.
The bullet items.
Just bullet items and like immediate, 0 to 3 years.
Like Roxanne.
What Roxanne and what we had said what we want to immediately, and give that to everybody so that they can then look at it and add to it, because I think if they have something in front of them, it's going to be easier for them to use their imagination or their knowledge to further this along.
And this could be the roadmap for the
Idea.
whole plan,
Yeah.
because we could have these bullet items and say,
Yeah.
see page such and such, and have a page on the specific item that we're talking about.
Yeah, I just think an outline. It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be in detail.
Like a working document,
Yeah.
like we can nudge.
Just bullets,
Yeah, we can take it.
Too long, no one's gonna read.
Right. So I've
No, that's what I'm saying, just bullets.
Yeah, just in terms of what I've
whole thing
got.
could be one
so far
page.
As the basic
Easy, couple
categories.
space.
Can we review the
Sure
basic
is.
categories? I've got actions. The other thing that we touched on earlier was the flora and fauna species inventory, maintenance, and education. And then in addition, Charlie, you had mentioned incident response. So I kind of see those as being the major categories of things that we have.
Testing part of the maintenance.
Yeah, maintenance. test
About testing.
maintenance.
Yeah, that's maintenance.
You know, what's interesting about these walls is that it's very hard for me to hear
Exactly.
Roxanne, whatever. So,
That's because you and I are both old. I have trouble too.
yeah, you're right.
We're going to get rid of them, Michael. We're going to get rid of them. Don't worry about it. I'm pretty sure they'll be.
No, I think Roxanne is lucky. I'm not as lucky. I think Roxanne was lucky she couldn't hear some of the things I had to say.
All right.
But-
You know, you're right. Maybe some people want to keep them.
I'm sure.
Okay, so are we agreed that so we'll make a chart, we'll send it out before the next meeting. And then we can sort of nudge it from there and make a better,
Next meeting on the 4th of March.
what do you guys think? Is that good, or do you want it,
Doing this once a month or twice a month?
we'll put in the spring's coming, we have to go back to twice a month.
Yeah, okay, the 4th would be 2 weeks.
But if you guys aren't ready for the
Oh, that's
4th,
fine.
No, the 4th is good, I think.
sure?
Yeah.
Fine with it.
Because I think spring's coming, we should start to ease back into
Oh,
double meetings.
One of the reasons that I think we should do it is because we're under a time restriction with the most important project we're talking about. We only have a window of opportunity is maybe 4 months to do this project. In other words, we have to get all the information, not only to GZA, but GZA then has to get all that information to NHESP. And the more we push it along, the greater our chance is of success. Many of us, Pat Kennelly, myself, Gary, we've been working on this thing for 10, 12 years.
50.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, so many of us are frustrated in terms of, this is our last hurrah to get this thing done in a way for many of us.
No, I think it's a.
So
good-
2 weeks, let's push it for 2 weeks to try to push this.
Then we're back on our schedule, like
Yeah.
our routine.
Yeah.
All right, so we're agreed. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
No, Jamie, wait.
Mike,
It's
go ahead.
Anita. I just had one question. I have
Go
my-
ahead.
So, just the meeting that Pat mentioned with I think DEP and that the select board and SBA would be attending. Would members of the Stockbridge Bowl Stewardship Commission be involved in that meeting also? So you can hear firsthand what's happening?
No, I think it's conservation, isn't it?
Pat?
No, it was Anita.
No, I know, but Pat, are you still here?
I am still here. It is, at the moment, the DEP has, we've designated 3 reps from the SBA to attend. And then we've said that they need to invite or allow the select board to choose who they're going to have represent the town. So in answer to Anita's question, that's the select board would decide who goes to the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, for helping and with that question. Anyone else in the audience have a question?
Carla?
What's your
I
name?
do. I do.
Go ahead.
You know, I can appreciate the complexity of
identify
what
yourself.
you've been,
What?
Can you identify yourself? I'm sorry.
oh, I'm Carla Krasnick. I'm from Beechwood.
Okay.
And I can appreciate the complexity of what you're doing. And I also can respond very significantly to what Michael just talked about. The level of frustration is enormous. And I'm beginning to hear people saying, so what's going to be different from last year? Because each year we see significant changes in the lake and it feels as if everything is always 2 and whatever years off. And that's a question that I think is going to come up more. It's February and it's not so long. I mean, the window that exists, you know, is not that significant until we're into the summer again. And a lot of the things, I mean, are time, you know, I understand we're dependent on other organizations and committees, but I'm just, you know, saying that the question of what's going to be different, how are we going to manage the lake so we don't continue on a yearly basis right now. I mean, can anything be done to make it more palatable? And so that was my thought and question.
The most
Thank you,
significant thing,
Carla.
the most significant thing we can do is have the dredger out there as much as, the harvester there as much as possible.
And we have the work order for the harvester, so as soon as the weather is good, we can get harvesting, and Michael's going, are you gonna be the?
No, I don't know, but right, it doesn't matter. We're gonna try to get the harvester, but I'm emphasizing trying to get that small one, because if the water is low, it's much harder for the driver, if they're not really knowledgeable, to go through around the island and down the outlet. And that's the beauty of the small one. The small one can go in areas where just the big one can't maneuver. But I emphasize, please, that they should call this company up and find out the status, or push them along to make sure it's
I would
fixed.
check on that for you. We'll
So
find out.
Carla, I don't know if that answers your question, but I can.
I just wanted to say that what Michael's talking about is critical. It really is, because, I mean, I really wish the DEP would come and would look at what that outlet looks like, because it becomes more impassable every year. So, yeah, I mean, the short term, getting the small one out in addition, Michael, is a good place to start, but the dredging has to follow pretty significantly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla.
The harvester is the most visible thing on the lake in the summertime, and it's one of the few things that we can really say is getting done.
Right.
And people see it, they hear it, and if it's not there, that's the biggest complaint for years now. It doesn't start early enough, they don't go late enough, they don't go 5 days a week. I mean, that's.
And it's also like mowing the lawn. It's a visual, like you do see it.
It's big lawn.
It's great. Anyone else have a question before we adjourn? All right, seeing none, who would like to make a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
March 4th.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie.